Good morning,
Yes, yes.
everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning, Influencing Travel Choice in Massachusetts. We have Rep. Steve Owens here to give us some opening remarks.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I think people are still trickling in. I see those numbers still going up.
Okay.
So maybe we'll wait just another 30 seconds or so as people trickle in. I do recognize the irony of having a transportation demand management webinar on Zoom. So none of us had to commute here. At least I didn't. Maybe you all did. But I'm doing this from the comfort of my basement. I hope all of you are similarly comfortable.
And that is the sustainable option.
Still dressed up for the occasion, though. All right. I think we've kind of stabilized a bit. So let me get started then. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming to the Influencing Travel Choice in Massachusetts panel discussion. I am Representative Steve Owens. I represent most of the city of Watertown, as well as parts of West Cambridge and North Cambridge. The goal of this webinar really is to introduce people to transportation demand management and transportation management associations. And I came to this because I have two TMAs that operate directly in my district, the Watertown TMA and the Alewife TMA, and several others operating nearby. So they are a big piece of our transportation puzzle here in the 29th Middlesex district. And we need to talk about transportation demand management because traffic is back and then some. I mean, it's not just your imagination. Here are some numbers. In 2002, INRIX rated Boston's traffic the fourth worst in the world. Costing drivers about 134 hours in time lost to congestion, or roughly, since time is money, $2,270 annually. That was 2002. How have we fared in 2023? Well, I have some numbers. In Boston and Cambridge, traffic increased by about 5.2% from August 2022 to August 2023. 5.2%, that's a lot. Traffic increased by 10.8% over that same period. Framingham, traffic increased by 15% year over year. So again, it's not your imagination. If you're going out there and wondering if traffic has gotten worse, it has. And the U.S. Census data, as well as our own eyes and ears, show that many people are returning to work in the office. Remote workers were down to 15% of the working population in 2002 from 18% previously. And the trend is expected to continue. Hybrid work, you may have noticed, it seems to be keeping people off the roads, maybe on Mondays, maybe on Fridays. But if your commute is like mine, midweek traffic is pretty brutal. At Tuesday through Thursday seems to be what people are settling on in the return to the office. So traffic is up. People are coming back to the office. On top of that, they're slow to return to public transportation. MBTA data shows the average weekday ridership in July of 2019 was just over 1.2 million average riders on a weekday, compared to about 750,000 August of 2023, which is the last bit of data I could grab. So that's nearly 500,000 fewer riders. Until the T can recover from its current safety and reliability issues, it's really hard to see a path back. And on top of that, hybrid work makes the calculus different, right? So maybe a commuter rail pass doesn't quite make sense if I'm only going in 3 days a week. Or maybe I'm okay if I get 2 really long car commutes, but I have 3 zero commute days each week. So if these trends continue, traffic is likely to get worse. And this might sound, simple, but the way to reduce traffic is to get cars off the road, right? Reduce single occupancy vehicle trips. And that doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens with careful transportation demand management and planning. And a key player in TDM are the Transportation Management Associations, TMAs. So if you don't know what a TMA is, it's a membership-based public-private partnership of businesses, institutions, and municipalities that are joined together under a formal agreement for the purpose of providing and promoting transportation options for commuters that reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. So these organizations are nimble enough to address the individual commuting needs of their members in a way that larger transit authorities can't, because they have the data to do creative things. Companies know where their employees live, and they can tailor programs to increase the likelihood of getting folks out of their cars. So previously, TMAs had received some additional funding via the Federal Highway Administration's Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, the CMAQ. And that provides federal funding for states to support projects, programs that improve air quality and reduce congestion. MassDOT distributed those funds through their statewide CMAQ program. The Baker administration stopped directing that money to TMAs, preferring their own projects for their own reasons. But in August of 2022, the legislature passed our Transportation and Climate Bond Bill, and that includes about $25 million for Massachusetts TMAs. That'll strengthen the organization's ability to do all sorts of things, provide education, outreach, new programs, services in support of our transportation demand management and climate goals. I've been working with representatives from MassCommute, who you'll hear from in a minute. They've been actively engaged with MassDOT for many months, working to develop the framework for this TMA grant program. It's being administered by Rail and Transit, and MassDOT has told us they are having the program established and funding ready before the end of the MassDOT fiscal year. So again, thank you all for coming out to this. I have going to take a point of personal privilege, and I do have a couple bills that I will send out to folks if they're interested that will support TMAs and TDM. I've got an act to support better commuting, H870, which will allow TMAs to fill out air quality reports for their larger participants. Those are reports that have to be filled out anyway, that the TMAs would then be allowed to fill out on companies' behalf in an aggregate. I have a bill that would require new developments that have 300 parking spaces or would generate 1,000 daily trips and require an economic impact report to form a TMA, and an act to promote transportation demand management by including TDM in a municipality's master planning process by default, instead of development by development, which is how it is often done now. So again, thanks to everyone for coming out this morning. Really appreciate your time. I know it is the 9 o'clock can be tough for some folks, at least in the legislature. 10 o'clock seems to be the time that most people have these. So really glad for spending the morning with us. And I am going to pass it to Melissa, who's going to put up a poll just to let us get a sense of how people are familiar with TDM and TMAs. And so take it away, Melissa.
Great, thank you very much. So before we get officially started, we have a quick poll question, and the question is, how would you rate your knowledge of transportation demand management, TDM? And let us know if you're a newbie looking forward to learning more on the webinar, if you have some limited experience with TDM, or if you are an expert in TDM. So in looking at what we have going so far, looks like most folks so far have some limited experience, and about an equal number of folks are newbies and experts. So that gives us a sense of our audience today. It looks like the answers have stopped coming in. So why don't we post the results so folks can see that. Yep, so 23% newbies, 55% have some experience, and then 23% are experts. So we can take down that poll. And so good morning, everyone. And so thank you, Rep. Owens, for those welcoming remarks and for your strong commitment to addressing the transportation challenges in Massachusetts. My name's Melissa Zampitella, and I'm going to be your host this morning. I'm the Executive Director for the Alewife Transportation Management Association and the Managing Director for MassCommute. Joining me today, we have a great group of panelists, and they will be sharing their knowledge and experience about transportation demand management, transportation management associations, and how it all fits together in impacting the transition from personal vehicle reliance to embracing alternative modes of transportation. So I'm going to quickly introduce our panel, and then we'll get into the presentation. So we have Allison Simmons with us. Maybe you can just wave hello when I call your name. Allison Simmons is the principal and co-founder of Northease Consulting Group. David Straus, the executive director for the Association of Commuter Transportation. Gideon Schreiber, the assistant director of planning for the city of Watertown, and Erin, property manager for Anchor Line Partners. So we're going to have each panelist is going to do about a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll have 20 minutes to a half hour at the end for a Q&A session. We ask folks to please type your questions into the chat. We'll monitor the chat and put those questions together and try to get to all of them. If we run out of time, we will definitely follow up with folks after the webinar. So to get us started, I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, and that is Allison Simmons. She is the principal and co-founder of Northease Consulting Group. She has been a champion in the transportation demand management field for over 25 years and has worked in leadership roles for several TMAs in the Boston area. She was also instrumental in the formation of several new TMAs, including the Alston-Brighton TMA, Assembly Connect TMA, and the Lower Mystic TMA. And Allison's going to give us a high-level overview of what TDM is and the role of TMAs. So Allison, take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. And just apologies for the 23% of you who are experts, because this is a little bit probably below your expert level of a presentation, but we're going to try to make it work for everybody in terms of talking about what TMAs are and what they do. And I just want to do on a personal note, as a TDM practitioner, thank Rep. Owens as being a great champion for us in the State House. It's always great to have our work recognized, and he's done that in a big way. So a shout out to Rep. Owens from us. So we're going to start with kind of talking about what TDM versus a TMA is. So I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes about these two ideas. What is a TMA versus what is TDM? So TDM is basically the strategies and policies that we put in place to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles and help with congestion. Sort of all of the ideas that we have, and the idea that we want to give people choice in their transportation options, versus a TMA is sort of your one-stop shop, where the folks that actually implement all the tools in the toolbox, the mechanism by which we can deliver those programs and services and strategies. And I have a statistic here, which I think is pretty impactful, just to kind of give you a sense of where we think our impact can be. So a 3% reduction in vehicle miles traveled can result in a 30% reduction in congestion. And as Rep. Owens mentioned, traffic is not going anywhere. In fact, it's getting worse. So we really feel like TDM and TMAs are sort of part of the solution to get us out of that predicament that we're in related to traffic. We have been doing TMAs and TDM in Massachusetts for 30 plus years. This is not a new concept in Massachusetts. There are currently 17 TMAs In the Commonwealth, we represent over 400 businesses, medical facilities, higher institution learning, property developments, and over 52 municipalities. There is one new TMA that's part of the 17, but is not represented on this map, and that's the Lower Mystic TMA, which includes Everett, Charlestown, Chelsea, Medford, and Malden. So TMAs are continuing to be implemented as a solution and a way for municipalities to implement transportation demand management. We can go to the next slide, Melissa. Sorry, Melissa, can you go back one sec? Because I do have a point I wanted to make. They are geographically based typically, as you can see by this map. So when we're in the urban core, they tend to be sort of smaller, a little bit more neighborhood based. A good example is the Seaport TMA represents, one part of Boston. But as you start to sort of get a little bit away from the urban core, we kind of cover a larger geographic area, potentially multiple municipalities within a quarter. Thanks, Melissa. You can go to the next slide. So this just talks a little bit about sort of what the benefits are of a transportation management association. We obviously can help with improving economic development opportunities and supporting community land use decisions. Many cities and towns throughout Massachusetts are seeing phenomenal growth in terms of development. And so TMAs can allow that growth while helping to manage the impact of that growth. Being able to speak to the community about what we're going to do relative to 1,000 new residential units that we're building, or new commercial developments that might be coming in, helping to kind of mitigate those issues. One of the things I think TMAs are particularly good at, and is a solution that's hard to find in other places, is the ability for us to look at transportation problems regionally. Oftentimes municipalities are siloed within the boundaries of their municipality, right? I can only do what I can do in Watertown because that's the only place I work. But traffic doesn't stop at the borders of our municipalities. And so the idea is that we can allow for regional and cross town line solutions through a TMA is something that I think is very effective. And then last but not least, why we're doing this at all is to alleviate environmental concerns. The Commonwealth and municipalities have very aggressive goals around this. Massachusetts has a goal of reducing air pollutants and carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. That's not that far away. So we need all the solutions we can get. And I think TMAs are a great one. This is just a little bit of a deeper dive on how TMAs achieve their objectives. And there's sort of 4 buckets I feel like TMAs work falls into. The first is advocacy. So working closely with our local, state, and federal folks to ensure that policy and infrastructure is happening at a higher level that can impact the congestion and air quality issues. Also working closely with our service delivery partners, the MBTA, Blue Bikes, regional RTAs, to, again, advocate for good policy that promotes TDM. The second one, and probably the biggest one, and what most TMAs are sort of known for, is, again, our programs and services. So this falls into the categories of, subsidies, helping people do tri-transit programs, just promoting each mode individually as an option, and helping people get over any barriers they may have to, say, learning how to bike, or how does a Blue Bike work. All of those things are things that TMAs do and fall under the programs and services piece. Marketing is my biggest point I love to point out about it. It's sort of where my love is around TMAs. The idea that, we can build it. We can build all the trains we want. We can build all the bike racks and bike share systems we want. But if folks don't know about it and they don't understand how to use it, then we've sort of missed the boat. And so the idea that we're constantly promoting transportation alternatives is a huge part of what TMAs do. And then last but not least is consulting, working with our individual members to get solutions at an individual employer level or individual building level. This includes things like surveying, helping to implement 529, the tax deduction plans, anything that might happen at the employer level. TMAs can help with that as well. We can go to the next slide, Melissa. So this really just speaks to sort of why municipalities and the state is interested and has been interested in the past on using TMAs as a way to implement TDM. We talked about that we have some aggressive goals that traffic is increasing. So obviously a lot of the solutions that TMAs can do can help with that piece. Another big piece that TMAs are often associated with is that last mile gap and shuttle services. So we know transit is built in a fixed way and often linear. And so helping to, again, cross-populate between municipalities and help people get to those solutions in transit. Development changes have been huge. And I'll talk a little bit about this on the next slide, but seeing a huge increase in residential development, a huge increase in hybrid work changes has really changed the way people travel. So just kind of getting our head around what the future of transportation looks like and knowing that TDM has to be at the core of that. And then the whole decentralization, right? We've sort of in Massachusetts stopped funding directly TDM initiatives. And so that's pushed a lot of the local municipalities to look at TDM at the local level, which has allowed TDMs, I think, TMAs to grow. And then just greater participation at the community level. I think a lot of folks probably on the call have started to see TMAs pop up in their regions, and it has sparked some interest on how can we do this within our community. Go ahead, Melissa, we can switch. So this just speaks to, I think, a lot has changed in the last 5 to 10 years around just the whole concept of TDM and who TMAs serve. I think the future of TDM is no longer just about the commute. We're really focusing on all trips, all modes, all jobs. It used to sort of be something that would happen at large employers or large institutions. We're starting to really be able to get our solutions to some of the smaller mom and pop, the retail shops. Certainly residential development has been a huge part of the growth sector for TMAs. So meeting people where they're at, where they live, and really focusing on all of their trips, not just how do you get to work, but how do you get to the grocery store? How do you get around town? Technology obviously is playing a huge part in what we do. Everybody has transportation information on their phones. And so tapping into that and tapping into flexible fare and integrated systems that can happen technology wise. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, sort of trying to get TDM policies that help to implement, we can help implement at the ground level through TMAs. And lastly, we mentioned that we do have a 501c3 of TMAs throughout Massachusetts. It's called MassCommute. It's our coalition, our association. All 17 TMAs are a part of this group, and that's who's hosting the webinar today. It's a great opportunity for us to work collaboratively and to promote, transportation management across the state. We just completed a car-free day on September 22nd that we all participated in, and that was a great event, had some great impacts. So I encourage you to learn more about MassCommute as well, or reach out to any of the TMAs. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Allison. So before we go on to our next speaker, we're going to launch another poll question. And the question is, which of the following would you say is your favorite TDM measure for mode shift? And there's a number of options here: HOV bus priority lanes, improved biking and walking conditions, tailored transportation marketing, subsidized bike share membership, subsidized MBTA passes, shuttle buses, carpool matching services, wayfinding signage, real-time transportation information displays, and finally, flexible work schedules. The answers are still coming in. It's looking like there's a good mix on here. Numbers are still coming in, so we'll give it another few seconds. Okay, so I think we can post the results. So subsidized MBTA passes seems to be the winner with 29%. After that, we've got HOV lanes and shuttle buses at about 18% each. real-time transportation information displays. Actually, carpool matching services did not get any votes, but in real-time transportation information displays on the lower side, people liked flexible work schedules and improved biking and walking conditions. So thanks very much for that. We can take down this poll. Results. I'm gonna get this off my screen. I can't seem to get this off my screen. Are you guys seeing the poll or are you seeing the presentation?
The
Let me see. Oh, there we
presentation, I
go.
think you're
Sorry
okay.
about that.
Yeah,
I got it. I got it. Okay, good. All right. So next I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker, David Straus. So David is the executive director for the Association of Commuter Transportation, known as ACT. And this is the premier organization in the TDM industry. David has more than 2 decades of experience and is a visionary leader in the TDM field. He takes great joy in leading ACT's efforts to advance the careers of TDM professionals, strengthen TDM programs across the country, and advocate for impactful TDM policies. David is going to take a deeper dive into TDM, talk a little bit about funding, and provide us with some examples of how other states approach TDM. So David, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you today. My name is David Straus, and I do have the great pleasure of serving as the executive director for the Association for Commuter Transportation. Previous life, I actually did run and serve as executive director for a Better City TMA in Boston, so very familiar with the TMAs and the great work that they do throughout the state of Massachusetts. So just want to take a moment to introduce you. And first, I'll clarify that that is not a single occupancy electric vehicle on the screen there. You can't see because of the sun, but there are actually 2 people, maybe even 3 people in that vehicle as a carpool. So just to clarify that, if anyone has a question. We can go to the next slide. So while I know some of you may be familiar with ACT, I'm certain there are many that are not. So I just want to take a quick moment to introduce us. The Association for Commuter Transportation is the premier organization for the advancement of transportation demand management. And our goal is to really build a strong community of individuals and organizations working to implement TDM within their communities or their work sites. ACT champions the use of TDM through the gathering of and dissemination of best practices, influencing policies and regulations across the country, and establishing standards of excellence and knowledge within the field itself. We've got nearly 1,500 members, and they represent the wide spectrum of entities within that are engaged in TDM. That's city and state DOTs, major employers, universities and higher education, MPOs, transit agencies, transportation service providers, TMAs, and other stakeholders that are all focused on creating a better journey for everyone. We provide our membership with professional development opportunities throughout the year. We actually have an event coming up in Los Angeles in a few weeks if anyone is interested in heading out to the West Coast. It's our TDM Forum. There we support career growth from the moment an individual decides to join the field and the industry all the way through retirement. We provide members with mentoring, leadership development. We have a professional certification program. It's via the TDM CP exam. We now have over 100 individuals that have earned that credential over the last 3 years. And it provides a new level of expertise within the field, providing confidence to agencies and employers about the knowledge and skills of their staff and potential new hires. And actually, Andrea Leary, who I know is highly involved in the TMAs here in Massachusetts, is part of the leadership of that group as well. So I'll thank her for that. We work to advance the entire industry through advocacy and influence of federal, state, and local TDM policies. We're at a really crucial time right now in regards to building support for TDM at the federal level as we look to integrate TDM opportunities within the guidance of programs established by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, along with the Inflation Reduction Act, along with trying to codify an updated definition of TDM at the federal level. Recently, we've actually been working to incorporate TDM language within the FAA reauthorization bill in recognition of the growing transportation demands facing airports across the country and especially the workforce of those entities. So we've been focused on that. Who knows what's going to happen in Congress with authorization bills, but we hope to see something move in the near future. We've also been working encouraging state DOTs to incorporate TDM within their carbon reduction strategies. These are plans that are required within the carbon reduction program and are actually due to Federal Highway in November. The carbon reduction program provides states with $6 billion in formula funds that can and really should be used to implement TDM strategies and support TDM programs throughout their states. I've not yet had a chance to see what the state of Massachusetts is putting forward in their carbon reduction strategy, but hopefully an opportunity to influence that before it's submitted next month. And speaking of carbon, last month, ACT released our decarbonization statement that outlines several actions that states, the US DOT, and Congress can take to support the decarbonization of transportation systems through the use of TDM strategies. And that was actually something that was a recommended strategy within the National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization that was released by the Biden administration earlier this year. We can go to the next slide. So to set the table, transportation demand management is a broad umbrella of strategies that aims to create the most efficient multimodal transportation system that moves all people with the goal of reducing congestion, improving air quality, and really stimulating and supporting economic activity. And it's the diversity of strategies is what makes TDM so impactful. At its core, it's all about providing real options for all people. While historically there's been a heavy focus on the commute trip, the pandemic really made it clear that TDM programs needed to evolve and actively engage and develop strategies for all trips and all people, creating a transportation that is not just efficient, but also equitable. TDM is about reducing traffic congestion by shifting mode choice away from single occupancy vehicles, improving air quality through shifting our dependence on carbon-based fuels and connecting people to jobs and supporting that economic activity. You can go to the next slide. So implementing TDM really requires action and engagement from all levels of government and collaboration between the public and private sector to be successful, and especially that collaboration piece between the public and private sector. At the federal level, transportation authorization really sets the tone and provides the financial resources to implement TDM at the state and local levels. Commuter benefits are established by Congress and perhaps are the most impactful tool to incentivize mode shift. And as we just saw in the poll, is everyone's most favorite TDM strategy is that subsidized MBTA pass. And that is something that is controlled and overseen by Congress as they set the commuter benefit levels. State and local entities develop the TDM plans and set out the goals and provide the structure for near-term actions and long-term projects. States and regions and cities can implement TDM policies that guide the use of transportation dollars, as well as increasing the efficiency of the transportation systems enacting rules that require private sector involvement, further leveraging those public investments that are being made. And of course, there's the NGOs like transportation management associations, who are really, the catalysts for action within their communities. As was noted by Allison, they are geographic based. They can be on the ground, really paying attention to the issues of concern and the opportunities that may be available. And they are great at aggregating the provision of services, coordinating local employers in efforts to achieve, goals that may be established within local TDM plans and regulations. Massachusetts, compared to most states, is probably one of the most well-positioned when it comes to the provision of TDM services through the TMAs. I had a stat of 15, but they just continue to grow and grow in Massachusetts. So 17 TMAs throughout the Commonwealth, which is wonderful to see. And then, of course, the employer side, which when committed can be the greatest influencer of mode choice within their workforce. They establish the corporate culture that can have significant impact on the adoption of the mode of the programs that are being put in place, and providing really the menu of commuter benefits services. Next slide. So TDM is a reliable strategy in communities large and small, urban and rural, and really everywhere in between. There is a common misconception that TDM is an urban solution to an urban problem of congestion. But TDM goes well beyond congestion relief. It's about, again, increasing the efficiency of our overall transportation systems and ensuring that all individuals have real choices for affordable, sustainable, and accessible access to their communities. There's, I've listed a bunch of various TDM strategies up on the screen here, and there's many more than that, but it serves to demonstrate that, TDM strategies can and are used by all communities across the country. For example, in Vermont, there's the Go Vermont program. It's grown to over 7,000 people since it launched in 2018. It's resulted in over 3 million miles not driven, and has saved Vermont commuters over $2 million. In Idaho, not a state that many look to as a beacon for transportation and progressive transportation policies, but Ada County's Commuter Ride program provides support to employers throughout their Treasure Valley, which is the Boise area, providing workspace mobility grants to support biking and walking and other options. They operate over 80 van pools in the Boise region and has thousands of individuals registered in their ride matching services. So these are just a few of those examples, and want to take a moment to jump into some of the state programs that are operating. Go to the next slide. So TDM is all about efficiency of resources, taxpayer dollars. TDM maximizes the utilization of infrastructure and funding. States support it for a variety of reasons, but it's usually a multitude of these and many of these. TDM reduces the need for large expansion projects that consume scarce financial resources. They often take years, if not decades, as we all know, in the Boston region to complete. And more often than not, they induce more traffic, resulting in the same problem that was supposed to be solved. But when expansion is needed and construction is needed, states often look to TDM to help mitigate the impacts of changing traffic patterns, as well as other construction-related impacts. TDM helps achieve the climate and decarbonization goals. That was, as I mentioned, identified within the National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization as a key lever that should be used to advance those goals. TDM provides more options to move people along with freight, ensuring that freight and commerce activities can move forward without the barriers of congestion. It leverages private sector dollars to support, an expansion of the public transit system. Funding first mile, last mile transit connections, other bicycle, pedestrian investments and infrastructure. So I'll go into the next slide and dive into a few states that are really doing some great work. First off, Washington State. Washington's commute trip reduction law has been in place since the early 90s. And is really perhaps the most successful TDM regulation in the country. In just the last probably 15, 16 years, the commute trip reduction law has led to the reduction of 30% of VMT per employee per day, which is a just impressive stat. The law itself impacts over 1,000 work sites throughout the state, including rural communities. In fact, in Eastern Washington, the fruit growers support the program, recognizing the impacts that traffic has on the delivery of their perishable goods. And they themselves embrace the commute trip reduction law program that is put in place. Washington also has a TDM executive board, which has kind of transitioned into a TDM technical advisory committee that helps the state integrate TDM broadly into transportation planning and its activities statewide. It's a group made up of public and private sector representatives, and it's actually chaired by the Secretary of Transportation, providing executive leadership to the efforts to advance the use of TDM strategies. And so Washington is always that first state we go to as a great example. Moving on, we have Colorado. And Colorado over the last few years has really become a national leader in just, historically, Colorado's had a large network of TMAs throughout the greater Denver, Boulder region, providing those ground services to employers in their communities. But last year, Colorado actually passed a unique tax credit called the Colorado Clean Commute, which allows employers a tax credit up to $125,000 for their investments in employee transportation services. That could be monies used to pay for shuttles, transit passes, TMA membership. So it's a great incentive to those businesses to put their private dollars into those programs. It also offers an innovative mobility grant, which provides up to $100,000 and focuses on the development and deployment of TDM strategies throughout the state. And that program, I think, just launched this last year as well. Moving on, we have Oregon. And Oregon's employee commute options rule is a mandatory program for all employers greater than 100 employees. It is a rule that has also been around for about 3 decades. It's very similar in some ways to the Mass DEP rideshare regulation, except it's got a bit more teeth to it and enforced. It requires a plan and provision of TDM strategies that's designed to achieve a 10% reduction in mode share. The rule has really strengthened partnerships with transportation service providers to drive increased utilization of TDM programs. There are alternatives to trip reduction that can be made. They actually have an option where, if you don't want to do anything, you can just pay $100 per employee into a emissions reduction fund that supports TMA activities. $100 per employee is fairly significant. That's about, for anyone with 100 employees, that's $10,000. So it's not a cheap way out, but it does put dollars back into TMA programs. So these are just a few examples from around the country that I wanted to bring to the attention of everyone on the call today. Moving on to my last slide and to close things out, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the significant amount of funding opportunities that exist to support TDM. CMAQ is the original and really the most likely program used to fund the development of TDM programs right now. It is how most of the TMAs in Massachusetts were established and supported for the first 3 years, along with some of their programs. But the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, however folks want to call it, really saw an infusion of new money to support TDM programs. That includes the carbon reduction program that I mentioned earlier. There is a resource up on the ACT website. If you scan the QR code, that takes you to a fact sheet about the carbon reduction program. There's the congestion relief program. This is also a new program. It's competitive based, so would be something that the state of Massachusetts would need to submit an application for. We actually had a meeting with USDOT Secretary's office a few weeks ago, and they know that the NOFO, the Notice of Funding opportunity for this program, should be going out in the next couple of months. So I encourage everyone here to look at that opportunity for funding and supporting TDM programs. And so there's a couple of them. We also have the resource that's kind of in the graphic there that lays out all the other programs up on our website if folks are interested in downloading a copy of it. So that is all I have. I want to thank you all, and happy to take questions later on.
Thank you very much, David. So our next speaker is Gideon Schreiber of the Watertown Assistant Director of Planning. And for the last 12 years, Gideon has worked for the city on a broad range of planning projects. He has led the project review process for large-scale redevelopment and implemented long-range planning goals for innovative transportation-focused solutions. And Gideon is going to talk to us about Watertown's experience with TDM and what led that city to implement a TDM ordinance.
Thank you, Melissa. So I'm Gideon Schreiber, Assistant Director of Planning for the City of Watertown. I apologize, I seem to have come down with a little bit of a fall cold, so hopefully I don't cough too much as I'm talking. You can go to the next slide if you want there. So yeah, so basically this is just I took this picture to show the amount of change along one corridor within Watertown. This is the Arsenal Street corridor. And within this area, we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years a substantial number of parking garages. And some of that is what was kind of pushing us towards this change of looking at TDM in a more separate way from the rest of our transportation studies through the special permit process. So on this slide, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 garages, and they all have substantial number of parking spaces. Next slide. So this is kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about. So I don't have to go over it here on this slide. So next slide. I just was keeping track of what I was going to do. So we started with using our existing ordinance and zoning to look at our transportation improvement, our transportation studies for larger scale projects. So any project that comes to the planning board or the zoning board of appeals could potentially have a requirement just under the zoning to do more transportation demand management. Historically, the TDM is buried within the TIAS, the traffic impact assessment. And when we started looking at some really old ones, they had some of those things that people said are really important for TDM measures, but they weren't tracked very well. They got lost within this hundreds of page long document. So we started to require a TDM separately within the zoning. During a zoning amendment process, we added the definition of TDM so that we were all on the same page with that. And we started to add conditions that talked about certain types of TDM measures, but specifically thinking about this idea of a proportional share to support a shuttle service, not on Arsenal Street, but on Pleasant Street, which is substantially underserved by the MBTA. And we had seen significant changes in the corridor with new residential, 1,200 units in over 10 years, as well as a pretty strong economic development base for employees. So there was a lot of traffic coming there in a 2-lane road. In this image, we also I just threw in this kind of the picture of the ordinance. So once we realized that zoning was working, but not the best, we created a ordinance for transportation demand management. So it created a mechanism, and it's outside of the zoning ordinance. Next slide. So within the ordinance, it creates a mechanism and creates the trigger. The requirements within there are for a reduction, and it equates to a 20% reduction from our current information based on the census data, the ACS data from a certain year, and that equates to a 60% SOV or less for commercial / industrial, and a 54% for residential for new projects that trigger it. So those were the triggers, and that's within the ordinance, but it also creates the mechanism to have regulations, and those regulations are approved at the staff level by our city manager. We of course would let the city council know for updating our regulations. The regulations will allow us to pivot or change how we're going to do this over time. We've definitely had assistance on creating all these, so that's the framework for what we now have after just using zoning for the initial pop-up. Next slide, please. So I guess I'm kind of whipping through here pretty quickly, but the regulations and rules for the TDM created a lot of easy to understand, straightforward TDM requirements that all new developments that were coming through the special permit process needed to apply and fill out and comply with. And it was a requirement in order for them to apply for a special permit, they needed to go through this TDM application process. And I think what makes Watertown's system somewhat easy to understand, but also kind of a checkbox style, is that we have a list of the measures that you need to or need to consider, and it's based on points. So if you check enough boxes, you get your points. I do think that we need to revisit those and review the regulations to see if the ones that we really want people to use are higher points, and the ones that aren't as effective are lower points, or remove some that are just not as useful or are not being used. So the whole system allows us to look at and assess that through our regulations. So as part of that, we created a system that included points for being a member of a transportation management association. So we decided to create the Watertown TMA. At the time, we had looked at possibly being connected to another TMA, but there was a strong interest in having our own board and our own determinations as a standalone TMA. So we went through this process, and actually Allison Simmons helped us with forming the TMA. And it created, our goal was for it to be an umbrella association that all projects that had to participate in TDM would be a part of. It also, our hope was that it would help guide new developers and new tenants to this entity to create more consistency across the city and to help. We have seen, and the other hope was that some entities that don't have to be part of the TMA would actually participate as well. So it wasn't just a mandated only type of system. So that was like the drive for the TMA. And I forgot the other one was that we felt like it was going to be the best mechanism for the condition that we've been putting into development, hoping at some point that we had enough momentum to create a shared shuttle system, specifically on looking to the Pleasant Street corridor, commercialization and redevelopment with mixed use and residential. We also were looking at our Arsenal Street corridor. So we have these two main corridors where there's been a substantial amount of redevelopment, and that condition that we've been adding to projects before we had TDM and before we had a TMA, the mechanism that we felt was going to be the best solution to help facilitate a shared shuttle network was the TMA structure. So we took the steps to create the TMA, and it's been operating now for quite a while. And they have created a shared shuttle for the two corridors. And the Pleasant Street corridor has a shared shuttle that's open to the public. And currently the members have not opened the Arsenal Street corridor to the public, but that was one of the goals. And the TMA is also a mix of both residential and commercial properties. So we have the idea is that some residential will be going the other direction. So these shuttles, when they're running, are not running empty one way or the other way. That hasn't always come out as ideally as we were hoping, but it's always a work in progress. Next slide, please. While working on these efforts around TDM and TMA, we also thought we need to do more work at the city level. And so one of the things we started looking at is a parking study for our core areas in the city. We have two squares, Watertown Square and Coolidge Square, where our most commercial areas are and where all of our metered parking is. And so we looked at the city's parking, and we looked at the utilization. We looked at how it's being used on weekends and weekdays. We looked to the private property piece, which is the hardest nut to crack, I think, long term. But we identified a substantial amount of private parking that was being underutilized. We also participated in MAPC's information gathering and parking study to look at how these larger residential projects were being actually utilized for parking. So we've had all these garages built. Some of them have TDM measures in place, and we actually did full day counts, and that supported the MAPC study, which has been recently. I think they've posted a more recent one, which includes something like 15 or 16 Watertown properties. It's a very eye-opening as far as the amount of space is actually being used in a lot of those residential midnight, in the middle of the night, but also obviously during the day. So these are all parts of the puzzle that we wanted to look at in order to help support our TDM measures for commercial and think about shared parking. Next slide. We also looked to required complete streets prioritization, which helps create and focus the broken links and creates a more connected and more walkable scenarios for both the workers and the people living in Watertown. So we've been working on our street network to try to work on ways to make it a better place for people to not want to drive. And so I think that the city's side of things requires looking at and being a part of the solution. We own a significant amount of right-of-ways. Statistics are something like 25 or 30% of the land area of the entire city is dedicated to right-of-way. And so how that's being managed is very important. And so no matter how much you tell developers that they need to reduce their vehicular use, if you don't have that environment to accommodate a more a safer and more compelling options for the commuters that are choosing not to drive, it's an important thing. So we also created the bicycle and pedestrian plan. So those two plans, you know, that built upon the prioritization plan, and we are looking to implement connectivity. We have a lot of breaks in our connectivity, so we've done a lot of planning to focus on the right of way and how we can better utilize that. And I think a part of this is to focus on alternatives to the single occupancy vehicle. Next slide, please. So we continue to use TDM in our special permit process. I think what's been really great about this is instead of it being a buried piece of the TIAS, it is now and it's been very tricky to teach traffic engineers how to do this, but we have a specific requirement that's separate from the TIAS, the overarching traffic study for developments. And so that becomes a standalone document that is easily available. And we have a application that is required for when that TDM is submitted to the city, and a staff person will review that and determine that they've met the requirements, make suggestions on how to make it better. And then we approve it. And so then it becomes this very specific thing. It's not buried in that multi-page document, but it's its own thing. And it's not a one-time thing. It's approved, and then there's ongoing aspects of it. So we have the special permit is the triggering piece. We have two types of projects. We have categories of what you can do and what points it would add up to. And if you have a basic TDM, you basically that's a one and done. You meet the requirements, then you're done. You're not getting monitored. You don't have to do all the extra work. It's a very low level bar. So we didn't want to ask them to have to do too much. It's unreasonable at the staff level. But they can be a member of the TMA if they want to be. Then we have the complete TDM requirements. So we have this, it's a pretty successful program. And we actually promote the TMA as a prioritized option, because oftentimes the level of dedication and the level of knowledge that people have once they end up with a development isn't at the same level as the TMA. And so having them be a part of and be a member of the TMA, and then use the TMA for the more standardized TDM requirements is it's been a pretty positive option for the city and also for the developers. Next slide, please. And so we started with some interesting, experiments like the line bikes, which were scattered across the city and actually were working really well, although they were floating around and kind of random. Then we went to the blue bikes. This one maybe is an anomaly because it's not at a dock. It's supposed to be at a dock. that's a rare occasion that they're not in their docks, but the Blue bike share system is something that we're hoping, and we've been seeing the developers committing to, either contributing to the stations themselves. And then longer term, we're hoping that either the TMA and or the developers will also help with the ongoing costs of maintaining that, much like the shuttles, which there's a picture of one of our shuttles. That's a 100% electric shuttle that we've implemented, and it's running along the Pleasant Street corridor. So we're testing some new technologies to make the resilient and environmental and sustainability sides of things even better. Instead of having multiple shuttles running that are also causing pollution, this hopefully will be the future of shuttles, and getting more and more people in off the streets in their single occupancy vehicles. I do think that, you know, other lessons learned with ours is that we mandated TMA membership, or we mandated participation. Some developments and developers, you know, it's forced, so you don't necessarily see the same level of excitement and buy-in. And so it's not a negative, but it's definitely, it was more of a top-down strategy by the city where we said, this is what you're going to do. The positive, I think, is that once they figured out that there's a very specific set of mechanisms, you end up with a pretty good participation, and the TMA has been a great tool. I think I may have talked fast. I wasn't tracking my time, but I think with that, I could get into a lot of other details, but I think this is a logical handoff to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gideon. So our final speaker, last but not least, is Erin Bump. Erin is a senior property manager for Anchorline Partners. Erin has been in the commercial real estate business for over 15 years and has managed numerous office and life science properties along the 128 corridor. She is passionate about promoting environmentally responsible approaches within the commercial real estate industry. Erin is going to discuss how membership in the local TMA has helped them achieve their ambitious sustainability goals while also enhancing tenant satisfaction. So Erin, join us.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Erin Bump. I'm with Anchorline Partners. I'm a property manager who I have buildings all along 128 in office and lab buildings, including Cambridge. And we're actually a member of multiple TMAs. In particular today, we can go down to the next slide. The next one's good. Yeah, and today I'm going to focus on our partnership with the Middlesex 3 Association, who operates our Bedford property close to the Route 3 corridor going north. Middlesex 3 has been a great TMA to partner with. They provide a number of services that benefit us. They have the eCommuter option, which is their proprietary database for helping people with carpooling. They do the emergency ride home feature, so no one gets left behind. They do a number of incentives and programs to promote biking, walking, with prize pools and fun things. And they do a lot of marketing and outreach that's beneficial to connect us as a community in the region. The shuttle is our biggest program that they run for us. And we partner with neighboring businesses in the area and share that shuttle, which allows us to have connectivity to those inner urban markets. Next slide. Middlesex 3 really gives us the connectivity to the urban markets, and they work with our tenants to help them with programs, networking, getting their employees aware of the program, helping them with commuting options. And they also are huge with their advocacy in public and private sector connectivity, inclusive of getting grant money that's helped us to lower our costs in participating in the shuttle. And they are tremendous at keeping us up to date on local issues, local happenings, and what's going on with the latest in TMAs and just other activities in the region. Next slide, please. This is our shuttle. We this really gives us as owner, landlord, developers, managers, an opportunity to be good private sector partners with the community. We are committed to shuttle programs in municipalities across the region. We see this as a great first step and hopefully a grander future with a lot of various transportation options. And I'm so grateful that this presentation got done today so that this information can just get out there. More people can become aware of what's going on, and we can get the funding that we need to make these programs more accessible across the region in both directions. It's really an economical shared resource with a nice customizable ticketing app, and it's the last mile. It connects you from the MBTA, the commuter rail, the buses to your workplace. And it ultimately allows us to increase our employee pool and have it helps us retain tenants, and tenants sign leases at these buildings because they know that they can get that top-notch talent from the Cambridge or Boston market. We use this wonderful app called Track. It's super smart and efficient, and allows us to be very hands-off in the process. Sometimes we can give back seats if we know we don't have a lot of people using it. Middlesex 3 is very resourceful and helpful in that way. We've opened up our parking lot for people to park and jump on the shuttle, and it has the free tracker so people can see where the shuttle's at, and is very sophisticated and up to date and keeping in touch with the riders, holidays, inclement weather, and they get Wi-Fi. And I must give them a great nod for handling this during COVID. That was no easy task for sure. And how they did that was wonderful. So really just short, sweet, and simple. We love the shuttle. We love the TMA, Middlesex 3, and all the other TMAs that we're members of. And we really are envisioning a future where, the transportation options are in both directions. We're connecting, Nashua to Lowell, and Worcester to, Marlborough or Framingham, and we are taking advantage of the reverse commute and expanding transportation options so that, like some of the people before me said, this isn't just for the urban markets. This is expanding and growing, and is going to become more commonplace. So thank you again for having me. If you have any questions and want to talk to me about any of my shuttle programs, I'm happy to chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. It's really good to see the perspective from a property that's utilizing the services. So thank you again to all of our speakers. This leaves us about 15 minutes we have left in the webinar for Q&A sessions. So a couple of my colleagues have been monitoring the questions that have come in through the chat. So I'm gonna ask them to pop up here and start in with the Q&A.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you to all of our presenters. I just want to let everybody know that we will be sending the recording of this presentation when it's all complete, and also everyone's presentations. So you will have those. And our first question is for David Straus. Where does Massachusetts fall in a list of states that are supporting TDM strategies? David?
Thank you. Where do we fall? I would say, and I've been doing TDM in Massachusetts a long time, so it hurts to say it, but I would say Massachusetts probably falls amongst the states that are actively engaged in TDM, it probably falls a little bit down towards the bottom of those states. So probably the middle of all states that are out there. I'd say that there's great signs that you know, the state is becoming more supportive and of TDM and TDM strategies and the TMAs, but for a lot of years there was a lot of friction, I think, internally within Massachusetts of you know, who should do what. And you know, as I noted in the slide, you know, for TDM to be successful, it really requires that collaboration and coordination between the public and private sector, between the state and the cities and the towns, and collaboration with federal highway and making sure that there's, you know, kind of a clear goal of what you want to achieve from a mode shift perspective, and strong support of the policies and regulations and incentives to make that happen. And I think for a long time that wasn't really here. There was a lot of kind of territorial positioning of who should do what, and were private shuttles taking away riders from the MBTA, or were they helping increase ridership for the MBTA? Or you know, so I have hopes that you know, with some of the leadership we've heard about today, Rep. Owens, and you know, the new funding to support TMAs, that you know, we'll start to see Massachusetts move up that list. It would be wonderful.
Thank you, David. Great. Question for Allison. Where does the 3% VTM reduction statistic come from?
So that is a statistic that I actually stole from the Coalition for Smarter Transportation, but I will get the source. I believe it's a federal highway study on TDM, but I think it's Emma who asked the question. Emma, I think we have your email, so I will get the actual document that's taken from and share that with you. It's either that or a Washington DOT study on VMT strategies, but I will get the actual source and share that with you.
Okay.
Julie, you're muted.
Yep,
Sorry.
I get it. Thank you, Allison. Is there interest in implementing parking cash out amongst TMA members in Massachusetts? It appears to be a both highly effective and popular program, and according to FHWA report that came out earlier this year, it will reduce VMTs by 10% amongst participants in the Boston area. Anyone want to speak to that?
I mean, I can just know I know there are some, and they're not actually involved in TMAs I'm involved in, but I know there are some companies in the Kendall Square area that have really started. The pandemic has sort of made this not so much a strategy that people are adopting because they think it's a good strategy from a parking cash out perspective, but just from the ability to be able to be flexible with how their employees are getting to work. So I think there's some companies that have just started to, rather than give you a T-Pass subsidy or give you a parking space, have just started to kind of give you an allowance for transportation, which has allowed sort of that flexibility, the idea of the cash out. But what I'm not sure is if you get the dollars, you know, if you don't spend them all, if you get them all, or if it's just literally like an allowance and whatever goes back to the company if you don't use it. So I think there's a little bit of a movement in that way in the terms of like flexible spending on transportation, but not so much the full out cash out where I think employees are going home with extra dollars in their pocket. I don't know if anybody else on that has examples in Massachusetts, but.
I'll just add that what parking cash out is when a company will give an employee who gives up their parking space sort of the cash value of that parking space. So it encourages folks to leave their cars at home and use alternative transportation modes.
With incentive, right? Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you both. Question for Gideon. Is it preferable for the TDM regulations to be separate from the zoning? And can you speak a little bit about that?
I mean, I think there's some pros and cons. It's a logical thing to have it within the zoning for our trigger. By having it be a separate ordinance with regulations, it allows it to actually, in theory, be applied to more than just zoning based projects. I also, we're a city, but the ordinance amendment is a single entity hearing with just the city council. The zoning amendment is it's a planning board and a city council approval process. And the way that the ordinance is set up is that the regulations are an add-on and can be altered over time as we find, best practices change, etc. The zoning ordinance it's not as conducive to that type of add-on regulations because we're hitting zoning laws in Massachusetts. So I think that's why we went down the path of creating an ordinance and with regulations is that it's not regulated under zoning that way. It's its own standalone thing that is maybe not brushing up against what you can and can't do under zoning. So I think it's a better option, at least and I don't know if in the town format, if it's as easy to do an ordinance. I mean, I guess it's a bylaw as a zoning amendment, but I know that the zoning amendment process is even more rigorous and harder to do through the town format. So
and there are a number of towns or in cities in Massachusetts that do have similar ordinances. So if anyone would like more information about that, we can connect them with the various cities that are offering that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Gideon. We got room for a few more questions here. As communities are moving to more by right development within the MBTA Communities Act, do you see that having any impacts on your TDM plans or participation? Anybody?
I mean, I don't think so because of, for our mechanisms, it's set up so if you have to be a participant and it's by right, there's still going to be some type of most likely a site plan review, which is allowed. And there would be an expectation, especially on a larger scale project, that they would have to still mitigate their transportation impacts. That's just my.
And if I might, I feel like the MBTA Communities Act is really an opportunity for TDM. I mean, right, the whole idea of it is we are building where there's transit, right? That's the whole idea of the MBTA Communities Act. So this is a real opportunity to show folks that TDM can work. We are trying to create an environment where new development, the impacts of the new development on our transportation network, on our congestion and our road network are even limited. So I would say that we're really coupling TDM concepts now in a world where municipalities served by the T are expected to do these new zoning requirements.
I think we have time for about one more question.
One more?
Maybe two.
Okay, great. And any questions we don't answer, we can answer after the fact in an email, any questions that come in. Where do you see the TMAs in regards to closing gaps in public transit for people who are not peak time workers, not white collar commuters, and not living in large developments? Do you see an opportunity to create transit open to the general public? Anyone want to take that?
I can jump in with a couple of examples for the TMAs that I'm working with. First of all, I think like Boston, Everett, Somerville all have started requiring developments to make any shuttle service or any service they do publicly accessible. I think there was a time and place where it was individual, companies serving only their employees. Those days are long past in terms of the clients that we're working with. example is in the Lower Mystic TMA right now, we cover Charlestown. We're working right now with the city of Boston and the Bunker Hill housing redevelopment to put in a shuttle that will serve that community, but also specifically, you know, the dollars are coming from the Bunker Hill housing project for that TMA. And then another example at Assembly Connect, we run a transit subsidy program that's specific to our retail employees. So again, I think there were, you know, 10 years ago, a lot of these services were going to white collar workers in office buildings. And I think we're really seeing a shift to, as I said before, kind of all modes, all people being able to have access to, you know, shuttles and subsidies. And the difficulty is on the retail program, for example, you know, the difficulty is there's not a huge HR department, right? Your manager is somebody who is a frontline worker as well. So there's challenges, but we're definitely trying to remove those barriers.
Yep. I've seen that trend too. There's, you know, some of the TMAs, like the Charles River TMA and the 128 Business Council, run really elaborate shuttle systems that are not only, you know, they're open to the employees for the companies and properties that are funding them, but they're open to the public as well. So they really serve the larger community. So
I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
in
So we have
Watertown, we have one shuttle that is open to the public. That's TMA run. The other one, the entities that are paying into it did not want to open that up at this time. And then the other issue we're having is just developers are continuing, or property owners are choosing to also run their own separate shuttles in order to accommodate their needs. And so I think that's an important part as well. But
okay. So we only have about 3 minutes left. So I just want to again thank our speakers and thank everybody for joining us today for this very important conversation. I have my information up here with my email address. So if anybody has any questions regarding what they heard today, would like to talk to us about maybe starting a TMA or implementing more robust TDM measures in your communities, please feel free to reach out to me. I can connect you with the right folks. So, you know, we're looking at doing another webinar in the spring on this similar topic matter. So we hope everybody would want to join us for that. And I will close this out and wish everybody to have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.